Hi everyone, my name is Vico and it is English Lore Teller. Chapter 4 War in America and After. Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States in 1860. He wanted to end slavery in America, but the South wanted to keep their slaves. So seven southern states decided to leave the United States of America. The North and South went to war in 1861. More than 180,000 black soldiers fought for the North. In 5 years of terrible fighting, more than half a million soldiers on both sides were killed. The North won the war, and slavery in the South ended in 1865. Now there were no more black slaves in America. But black people in the South did not have the same rights as white people. Black could not go to white schools, and there were very few schools for blacks. Blacks could not go to the same shops or restaurants as whites. When blacks did try to get their rights, whites often answered them with violence. Most whites in the South were angry that they had lost their war. They did not agree with the end of slavery or with equal rights for blacks. In 1867, a group of soldiers in the southern state of Georgia started a secret organization for fight against black rights. This organization was called the Ku Klux Klan. They wanted to frighten blacks and stop them from voting in elections. Klansmen dressed in white clothes and covered their faces so nobody could see who they were. Sometimes they took black people out of their homes and beat them or killed them. They also burned the schools, homes, and churches of black people. In the 1890s, more than 1,000 blacks were killed by whites in the South. Most blacks were too frightened to tell the police because many policemen in the South actually belonged to the Klan. Early in the 20th century, more than 4 million whites belonged to the Ku Klux Klan. Now that blacks were not slaves, they were free to move out of the South. Thousands of blacks left the South and moved to northern cities like Chicago and Detroit. There was more freedom for blacks in the North, and there was work for them in the factories. By the beginning of the 20th century, a quarter of blacks lived outside the South, mostly in big northern cities. In the 20th century, blacks began to play a more important part in the life of America. New schools and universities for blacks opened. Jazz, the music of black people, became popular all over the world. Harlem, a black neighborhood of New York City, became the center for black musicians like Duke Ellington and black writers like Langston Hughes. Paul Robeson was a famous black singer and actor. He sang about the troubles of black people. But many whites were angry when he appeared in Shakespeare's play Othello with the white actors as his wife. There were many black sportsmen. The great black runner, Jesse Owens, won gold medals for America at the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin. As Hitler's and other Nazi leaders watched, Owens beat the best white runners. The boxer, Joe Louis, was born into a poor black family in Alabama in 1914 and was taken to trade when he was 10 years old. In 1937, he became the world boxing champion. His greatest fight was against the German boxer Max Schmeling. Louis had lost to Schmeling in their first fight. When Schmeling returned to Germany, he was called a hero by the Nazis. Hitler himself said that because Schmeling had won, whites were stronger than blacks. When Louis beat Schmeling in 1938, blacks all over America were wildly happy. Joe Louis fought 20 times as world champion and was never beaten. But once again, the greatest changes in the lives of black people came for a war. In 1941, America entered the Second World War. Black soldiers fought bravely for their country, but the American army was segregated. Black soldiers did not fight beside white soldiers, and they were not treated as well as white soldiers. When black soldiers protested about this, there were often fights between black soldiers and white soldiers. When these black soldiers returned to America, they wanted equal rights for themselves. In some of the countries they had visited, black people had the same rights as white people and were treated fairly. After the war, even more blacks moved to the north and became richer. Something got better. Black workers in 1950 were paid twice as much as black workers in 1940, and more blacks began to go to university. But black Americans got much less money than white Americans, even when they were doing the same jobs. Many fewer blacks than whites went to university, and even in the North, there was still the problem of racism. The Second World War had been a war against racist ideas. Many whites in America realized that their own country was racist. Blacks began to vote, and white politicians began to listen to them. In 1948, President Truman ended segregation in the army. In 1954, a new law said that blacks and whites must go to the same schools and learn together. Things were getting better for black people, but they wanted more. They were ready for someone to lead them toward greater freedom. They were ready for Martin Luther King.